Hi, I am Dee Dee Jones.
And I'm Stan Copeland, and I'm the pastor of Lovers Lane United Methodist Church in Dallas, Texas, and this is the Hope Connection. And today we're very pleased to have the Reverend Daniel Hawkins with us from Fort Worth, Texas. Actually, the Tri-Cities there. He serves the church Martin United Methodist Church in the Central Texas Conference.
Yes, sir.
HEB.
Yes, right. And the North Texas Conference of the United Methodist Church and the Central Texas Conference of the United Methodist Church have been doing a lot of things together, and it looks like that our unity is just around the corner, and we're very excited about that. But I want to tell you, Daniel, the main reason I wanted to get you in here is your podcast, Strangely Warmed, that I know is sponsored by the Central Texas Conference, but it's your podcast, and you do a tremendous job.
Stan, thank you so much. Pod Strangely Warmed came from a place where, in the midst of all the struggle that was parts of 2022 and 2023 in the United Methodist Church, how do we tell the good Methodist story, right?
Absolutely.
How do we invite people into seeing and proclaiming not just what makes the headlines, right? But also what makes the transformation, makes the difference in the lives of our local community. And so we've had folks on from across the conference and the region to tell the good story of what's happening in their local space, and it's been a real gift. And we are some Methodist nerds. We are Pod Strangely Warmed, but we hope that the Pod Strangely Warmed might help some hearts be strangely warmed in the good old Wesleyan tradition.
You know, I want to tell you something. John Stevens down in Houston has a wonderful podcast too, and what's the name of his podcast? I'm blocking
his
it right
Pod
now.
Have Mercy.
Pod Have Mercy.
Yes.
And then I saw your Pod Strangely Warmed, which warms the heart of every United Methodist. And you know, at worship here at Lovers Lane, we say God is good all the time. And I thought this show should be called Pod is Good, but it got just annihilated by the powers that be in the room. So here we are, the Hope Connection. But
it didn't pass the sniff test.
No. Pod Strangely Warmed is perfect, and you do.
I had to work hard for mine. It almost got cut on the trim room floor, but I'm thankful for it.
Well, you're stronger than I, and good for you. You got to stand up for what you believe in. That's good. Tell us a little bit about your ministry. I know your mom was a pastor in the Central Texas Conference, and just tell us about your family and God's call on your life.
Yeah, I've been a pastor in the United Methodist Church for about 15 years now, all in the Central Texas Conference. Born and raised in Waco, Texas. Went to Baylor, pursuing a degree in economics and real estate with the ultimate long-term plan of getting a PhD in that and become a professor somewhere. And then God whacked me really hard in the back of the head with a metaphorical 2x4.
Like only God can do.
The way God works. And the way God worked with me was only after all of the things that needed to come into place in order for the first dream to become a reality. Could I then say, I'm going to set that aside, right? After everything was lined out, I'm like, okay, God's calling me something else. I'm going to set it aside and do this other. I was hesitant to respond to that call because I didn't want it to be an extension of my mom's call. Right. I'm third out of fourth generation United Methodist clergy. So my great-grandfather, my mother, and I are all United Methodist clergy. I deeply believe that the best work of the church is work that's done in relationship and in community.
Absolutely.
Right? In 1 Thessalonians, Paul says that we were glad not only to share God's good news with you, but our very lives themselves, because we cared for you so much. Right?
That's right.
And that becomes kind of the core and the heart of what I try to do. And the beauty of that is that translates, right? It translates across size of church. It translates across culture of church. It translates across urban, rural, suburban, et cetera. And so over the last 15 years, one of the things that I've really enjoyed is that I've been in about every kind of church possible, I think, or at least within the bounds of the Central Texas Conference, right? Tiny rural churches, large suburban churches, county seat churches, both small and mid-sized, and now a multilingual, multi-ethnic community of faith at Martin. And each one, God has been alive and God has been at work, and we've seen life transformation happen, right? And community transformation happen because of God's goodness, right? And so it's been a lot of fun, and it's been a big part of that journey the last 4 years has been through podcasting, right? One of the things that I love is having these kind of conversations around these tables. The sermon is a fantastic tool in our pastoral ministry arsenal, but it's a monologue functionally, right? We'll ask rhetorical questions that invite people to reflect and things, but often you don't get a whole lot of talk back.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But in this kind of space, we get to really have a conversation. We get to really unpack and not just go for 20 minutes or 25 minutes or God help us 30 minutes, right? And then, or God help our people if we go 30 minutes. But that kind of that way of being in community and in conversation, God unlocks things and speaks to us in new ways.
Well, you've been in different sizes of churches, as you've mentioned, different kinds of churches, but you've also been in different capacities in your ministry. You have you've started a church, so you've been a church starter, and you're serving a church right now that really is attracted to us because we have a very diverse and intentionally so multicultural congregation. I want to talk to you a little bit about that. What we find, Dee Dee, I think here, because Dee Dee serves probably our most diverse congregation within the congregation, which we call Crosswalk.
Okay.
And just all kinds of people find themselves there. They're fed by Dee Dee's preaching and the wonderful music there. It's kind of a microcosm of the larger congregation. But we also have a lot of African from lots of different countries, probably 12 to 14 different countries. And your diversity is with Tongans in that HEB area. There's quite a few people from Tonga. And can you talk to us a little bit about that and how that happened?
Yeah.
Well, one of the beauties of where I serve in HEB, right? It's not only a great grocery store; it's a wonderful community. The Hurst, Euless, and Bedford community is that the largest concentrations of people of Tongan descent outside of the Kingdom of Tonga itself, which is a Pacific island, think in line with Samoa and New Zealand and kind of that part of the world, just to geographically ground people, are in Euless and Bedford. Right, the largest concentration of Tongans outside of Tonga in the world, right there, and they're the pioneering generation from Tonga to the United States came in the 70s and 80s and some early 90s largely. As DFW Airport expanded, they recruited hard the Kingdom of Tonga, looking for really good workers, people willing to work hard, and it was an attractive proposition for the community itself, right? As you know, folks with the airlines, they have those flight privileges, and so they can both be in the United States and kind of help establish a new life for their families while also being able to stay connected to home and go home and be connected in the Kingdom of Tonga there. It's a deeply rich community of deep faithfulness and
loyalty.
Loyalty, absolutely. It's a communal culture, right, where family matters.
Yeah.
There's nobody who's got power like a Tongan grandmama, right? And so it has been a gift to me over the last couple of years to be able to experience faith in a new way, right? To be invited into a new expression of that community and to experience faith from a couple of different perspectives, right?
Yeah.
One of the gifts that that community has given to me, because often in more Caucasian-centric circles, we've been told it's not polite to talk about what? 3 things, right? Religion, politics, and money, right? Well, here we are at church, right? The intersection of at least 2 of those things, right? We have our stewardship, our financial, kind of connection to support the ministry of the church, and also to say to God, right, thank you for what you've given me, right? In our Tongan community, they have this thing called Misa Nale. It happens twice a year. It's a special evening committed to sacrificial giving. Misa Nale translates into missionary. Right, in English. And Misa Nale is a night in which each family unit within our Tongan community comes with their semi-annual offering, right? In more Caucasian-centric churches, more kind of dominant culture churches, what happens, right? We put our giving on an automatic draft on the bank or on the auto charge to the credit card, and it just kind of happens on a bi-weekly basis, and that's the way it is. Right. Our Tongan community will save and save and save and bring it as a one-time offering or a twice-a-year offering in spring and in fall. But the cool thing, the part of that that's a gift, is not just the sacrificial giving because they embody that, but as a part of the evening, there is song, there is dance, there is testimony. And each family unit will come and give their offering and have it announced.
They tell it.
They tell it.
They tell it.
Yeah. And as a part of that, a member of the family offers a kind of an honorary dance, right? Expression in the midst of that, right? As a gift to the community. And somebody from within the family offers a testimony to God's, they give their hope connection, right? They speak where God is alive and at work in their life and in that last 6-month period. And so that night of dancing and testimony and sacrificial giving is a gift to me. And so Martin is one of these communities. We are experiencing incredible joy, but we're also working our way through some emerging generations things. Yeah. And this is one of these things where I know we've had some initial conversations, but I'd love to pick y'all's brains long term about what did that emerging generation work look like, right? As the pioneering generation, because most of our Tongan ministry is formed for the preferences and what is good to the soul of that pioneering generation, right? But as folks in their late 20s and early 30s come in, and then their kids come in afterwards, how do we maintain that connection to the church community while also saying, what matters now is what feeds your soul, right? We're going to have all the historic traditional things that are an embodiment of Christ and culture, right? But how do we keep creating and recreating and be willing to try new and try again? Things that help Christ meet you today, not just what met your parents or your grandparents historically. That's one of the things. Stan, you were very kind to name that I was a church planter. I happily carry the banner of being a failed church planter, right? My church plant didn't work. But one of the things I learned in the midst of that is the power of continuing to try and the power of iteration, right? And if you at first don't succeed, try again, right? Keep going in a meaningful way and see what can I learn from what just happened and what because so often in church we don't ever start because we were worried about failing at the back end, right? But I can look at
failing again
failing again
failing again.
We have a world right now that I'm not going to say it's as divided as ever. It's divided again. Because we've lived through divisions in our culture as well as in our churches. The stark divisions I think we find now, have to do with differences. People who are different, and there seems to be just this kind of coming apart. Like we don't find that middle ground. We don't find that way to appreciate the other in the midst of their differences. So I guess my question to you is, where have you found hope in your local setting with so many different kinds of people there? And what do you think that hope that you're finding, how does that witness to a world that is in the midst of all these divisions?
Well, where I'm seeing that hope right now, and I'll just begin. There are moments where, our community identity, right? We say at Martin, we are diverse, we are mission-driven, we are family, and we're committed to Christ, right? Diversity is the first thing we name as we proclaim who we are and who God is inviting us to be. With that comes an acknowledgement that diversity is hard, right?
It is.
We have an ongoing conversation within our staff that some days today is diversity is hard day, right? Where we run into those moments where someone's default expectations as to, of course, this is how something is supposed to go or something is supposed to be, run into somebody else's default expectations as to how something is supposed to go or supposed to be. And we have to navigate our way through that. Where I'm finding hope is that within at least our pocket of God's kingdom, we see a spirit within the community that has been intentionally cultivated, right? We've been a multilingual community of faith for 15 years, right? This was slow work. It's not fast work. But that has said the hope comes when we say we are going to celebrate the places where we are in unity, and we are going to appreciate and honor those places of difference and those places of diversity, right? And so that those two things can come together. And when we have those moments where we see not only do I just want it my way, right?
Or my expectation.
Right? It's the same thing when you talk about to families or to young couples when they're getting married for the first time, right? The power of expectations, right? People can get in fight in their marriages over how to squeeze the toothpaste tube, right? Because expectations are powerful, right? just for clarity, only heathens squeeze it from the middle, just so in case we need to know. Right?
Got it. Good to know.
Good to know. Good to know. But I'm finding hope in those moments where in my church, as we're doing the real work of helping people of all generations know love, experience love, and share love, is that people are able and willing to name kind of their expectation, right? But they're also willing to flex on it, right? There's clarity on what matters most. And when that clarity comes into being, it creates space to be flexible, right? The first Missionale I went to as pastor, right? I came in not knowing what I was doing, right? I had begged, somebody give me a little more understanding. Somebody give me a little back, you know. I don't want to be the guy who puts my foot in my mouth. I don't want to be the guy who, you know, is uncouth in some way. I don't want to be, you know, the person who messes up this thing that I've been told is big and beautiful and amazing and holy and good. And people are just like, you just have to experience it. It'll be fine, right? And so I do. I go and experience, and I go with a heart to appreciate and see. But through that, we learn some things, right? Because with the transition in pastoral leadership, there was also an increase in energy. Every time you have a pastoral transition, right? There's grief over the pastor you're losing, but also excitement over what new could be, right? Yeah. And so people wanted to experience my first Missionale at the same time they were experiencing their first Missionale. And for a lot of our young families, it was their first Missionale too. And so we had this cohort of 10 or 12 girls under age 10, right? Who, when people started dancing and the music was bumping, because the music gets bumping.
Yep.
There's a DJ hired specifically for Missionale, right? It's no joke. Those little kids are hopping up and they are dancing.
They're getting with it.
They're getting with it. And the whole time I'm going, are they doing this the right way? Are they, are they expressing it the right way? And it turns out no is the answer to that, right? Because you are welcome to dance as the family member is dancing, but you're encouraged to dance behind them in support of them, because that moment is their gift, not to be in front. And we had 10, 12, 14 little blonde-haired, toe-haired, blue-eyed little kids dancing all over the front of this thing, making a mess, if you were going to get really locked in on how it's supposed to be, right? Yeah. But the hope came in that we didn't get locked in. We didn't get rigid, right? The expression from within our Tongan community was, we love that they want to be a part of this expression of our faith, right? They love that this is moving from being like our thing as in the Tongan community of Martin to our thing as the community of Martin, right? And also the other piece of the hope is that our Palangi community, which is the Tongan for Caucasian people, is they had a heart willing to listen and learn too, right? And so for the second Missionale, I made a quick video called, Missionale for Palangis, right? How do we participate well and fully?
And the invisible walls come down in that moment.
Yeah.
Like, so everything that it's supposed to be doesn't have to be.
Right.
That's a big deal.
And the bigger point of honoring God and celebrating our church family and the community and supporting the ministry that Christ is inviting us to, right, becomes more important than did this go exactly the way I expected it to, right? Or did it go exactly the way that it was supposed to? Yeah. So there's willingness to learn, there's willingness to flex, there's clarity on what is essential in this. Yeah. And that's where it's meeting in this specific place for us, because 3 of those kids who were dancing like a fool in front of people were my girls. 3 girls, right?
That's awesome. That's awesome. The pastor's kids.
The pastor's kids, right? And nobody was going to be rude to the pastor's kids, maybe, but at the same time, I felt terrible when I learned. Yeah. But there was grace in that. But there was also incredible grace in the willingness to learn.
And unity.
And unity, yeah.
And unity.
Daniel, I've got 2 granddaughters. You've got 3 daughters. And to have them in a church like yours, I don't have to tell you what a wonderful faith experience that is for them, And I think the same for our children who grew up here at Lover's Lane in the midst of our diversity, and also our grandchildren who are coming along. But I want to thank you. You're a big hero to me, and I'm looking forward to be at Pod Strangely Warmed soon, and you might go on Pod Strangely Warmed and find out what's going on over in the Fort Worth area that Daniel's leading, and we're so thankful that you've come on today to Hope Connection.
Sure. Thank you.
And Daniel, we're especially thankful. And Dee Dee, this has been great, hasn't it?
This has been awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you for
it
sharing.
has been.
For sure.
Thank you.